Hello, lovely people. I'm very much back. It is February, the sun is shining. We've actually got some really nice weather, which is highly unusual for this time of year. It's still very cold, but it's very bright outside, which is nice and makes me feel less miserable during the winter. I know I've kind of already missed about a week of February, but I have still been focusing on my goals for this month. I feel like it's flown in. January was such a long month and such a short month at the same time. It felt like the start of 2025 was very kind of rapidly approaching. And now all of a sudden it's February and I kind of don't know what to do with myself. So I've decided my intentions for this month are to commit to finish it February and try and get through some more of my whips. I have a couple of finished objects that I'm hopefully going to show from January, and then also some in-progress pieces as well, which are kind of, there are some new things in there and also some that were in my last whip video. But I was very determined not to restrict myself to only focusing on the same 4 or 5 projects for 2 months, because I think it gets a little bit tiring, especially if they're a bit of a burden, you know. So I thought I'd keep it fresh and keep my interests sparked by introducing some new things. But I haven't actually bought any more materials or yarn since the new year. So I think that's really good pact that I've stuck to. And I think by way of treating myself at the end of this month, I'm going to buy the yarn to cast on a new jumper. So hopefully that will be a nice treat to look forward to. And February is such a short month, so I'm sure it'll come around in no time at all, really. Let's get going with my finished objects. Oh, no, today I thought I should probably introduce what I'm wearing in every video, because I obviously don't have any content from last year, so all of my current knits that are in my wardrobe nobody has seen. So this today is the Deegan Flower Power pullover by Lindsay Deegan, and I had a bit of a time with this pattern, but I'm very much enjoying the finished product, and I've had this now for about 4 or 5 months, I want to say, and it's in Drops Alpaca, which again I have mixed feelings. I did write an essay on Ravelry if anybody's interested when I finished it, but safe to say I very much like owning it, and I'll probably never feel the need to make another one. So on to finished objects for January of 2025. The first piece that I believe we completed was this, which is the step-by-step sweater in the Nora yarn that I had as a Christmas present. And I've worn this to death already, and it's looking pretty fab, to be honest. I'm in love with the colours. The finish was great. I did make a few adaptations to the pattern. I think the beauty of the step-by-step sweater pattern, which is a pattern by Florence Miller, is that it is so adaptable. Again, it's just a very staple raglan sweater. She gives quite a few modifications within the pattern so that you have different options for shoulder shaping and necklines and things. To be honest, I've made 2 versions of it now, and each one is slightly different, which I like. But I did kind of wider straight sleeves on this rather than the tapered sleeves that she writes for in the pattern. And I also did a 2x2 rib with a rolled hem on the collar, cuffs and body hem, which turned out beautifully. The yarn's holding up really well, actually. I've probably worn it, oh God, at least 10 times. And it's pilled slightly, especially under the arms, but I think the nature of the Noro Ito is very much that it pills a little bit initially, but the pills don't really continue. And because it's quite a sheepy kind of felted almost yarn, the pills aren't that noticeable either, because they just kind of become part of the texture. So they're not bothering me too much at the minute, but I know that it won't be an issue to depil or to shave them when I need to. But yeah, other than that, it's holding up excellently. It looks just as good as it did when it was finished, and I'm very pleased to add it to the collection. And on to the next object, which I finished, I think, in the middle of January, which was the Traveller's Cardigan by Ozetta. And this was knit up in West Yorkshire Spinners, the Croft Shetland Aran, I believe is the full name, in Norwich, I'm not sure, I haven't Googled, I'm sure it's a place name and I'm sure it's in the UK and it's probably bad that I don't know it, but it's one of the two. And Melby as well is the kind of rusty orange colour. And I held this with a strand of Drops kid silk, which is generally my go-to mohair because something about me is really reluctant to fork out £10 for 25 grams of mohair. And I'm sure I'd love it if I did. But at the moment, I have no issues with Drops, which is like £4, I think, £4.20 or something for 25 grams. And is a lot more affordable to me at this point in time. I know people have their own issues with it and the texture and the amount that it sheds and all, but I think for the price, it's very good value and good quality for the value as well. And this turned out spectacularly, actually. And I was very happy to have given this pattern another go because I think in my last video about whips, I did talk about the fact that I'd made one of these in 2020. Oh God, it might have even been 2023. I don't know if it was last year or one of the years. Anyway, recently, that didn't quite go to plan and it was entirely my fault. So I'm glad that I have redeemed myself and come out with this, which is just a really comfy, oversized Aran cardi, which I've already had a lot of wear out of. I took this away with me and basically didn't take it off for 4 days and it's still held up pretty well. So I'm very pleased with that. And I think I'll definitely be making another one in the future. Now, technically, I am 50% of the way through my original whip bundle, which I think is great progress for January because I was really worried that I wouldn't finish them all by the end of February. There has been a casualty. I don't know if anybody remembers, but I did start the Cloud Blouse by Petite Knit very long time ago, and that was on my list to be finished, and it was being knit in 2 strands of Drops brushed alpaca silk. Now I actually finished this last week. Actually, it might even have been this week. Hang on, let me see. 2nd of February. I finished it 4 days ago. And it lasted about 5 minutes off the needles before it went in the bin. Because I was gutted because I put so much effort into it, but actually in a way it was just so freeing to be able to throw it away. Because I'd been clinging onto it for so long, and I cast everything off and I tried it on, and it looked horrendous. It looked so bad. It was such an odd shape. It was stretchy and baggy in equal measure. It was probably a combination of a lot of factors. I don't think that the pattern is a bad pattern. I think for the garment that I was trying to make, I would have been better off following the Cloud sweater pattern, which I believe it has slightly more ease and different kind of shoulder and arm shaping. Because my main problem with it was that the armholes were incredibly tight, and yet it still had a dropped shoulder. So the shoulders came down to about here, but then the sleeves were very fitted, which just looked very odd with a drop shoulder. And I wonder if that's maybe, some of the differences between the sweater pattern and the blouse pattern, or maybe an inconsistency in the grading for slightly larger sizes, that maybe there wasn't really enough ease on the sleeves compared to the amount that there was on the body. I couldn't say, but I just was not a fan of the fit at all. I thought that the yarn was very, very stretchy, which could have been nice, and I had originally anticipated that it would have been nice, but it found that it just had no structure. So around the collar, by the time I'd actually finished working on it, the collar was huge, and obviously other parts of the blouse were very tight. The ribbing had no elasticity. I think it's just in the nature of the yarn that it doesn't do great memory or great elasticity either. It has a lot of stretch, but it doesn't have a lot of memory. And so I completely fell out with it, and it's now gone in the bin. I decided to cut my losses. As much as I could have probably used the yarn for something else, I didn't fancy frogging back 1,000 metres of brushed alpaca silk. I think that would have tipped me over the edge, actually, and been a really poor decision. So I'm happy to treat this as a learning experience. And I don't see it as wasted time because I learned a lot about the patterns that I should choose in the future and the yarns that I should choose as well, and trusting the instructions in the pattern, which I'm not great at, it has to be said. And I think, in a way, it was probably beneficial exercise. And I didn't feel like I spent as much time on it as I could have because I was so desperate to finish it. I was hating the process so much that I was rushing my way through it and not really paying attention to the details or putting in as much care or effort as I like to put into the rest of my things, which should just be a sign straight off the bat. And I think one thing that I really need to learn to do this year is to just call it early when I've decided that a project just isn't for me and it's not worth spending the time toiling over and being miserable and thinking that it's hanging over your head just to have something that you don't really love at the end of it. So in that way, I think it's been really beneficial for this year. And I've still got a bit of the yarn left. I'll probably use it if I have scraps or hold it together with something else in a different project. But I'm not thinking about that at the moment. I think I'm very glad and very relieved that it's out of my way so that I can move on to better things. And it was at the point when I finished it where I hadn't even woven the ends in or blocked it, and I already knew that it wasn't for me, so I wasn't going to waste the time doing those finishing steps either, because they are time consuming in themselves. So yeah, I'd be very interested to see if anyone has successfully made a version of that. I know there are a lot of patterns on Ravelry, and I have seen a lot of them on Ravelry, but it's hard to tell whether, you know, from photos and things, if the pattern has turned out how people anticipated with the right fit and if it's comfortable and if they get the wear out of it and that type of thing. So if you have made the cloud blouse, please let me know because I'd be really interested to see it. Okay, drawing a line under that one. I also finished a 4th object in January, which is just really good going for 1 month, I think. And like, yes, these were all projects that were in progress, so it's easy to finish things when they're all 3/4 done. But I did knit an Oslo hat for my friend, which is already away, but I should have a photo to be able to show you. And this was in a yarn which I was gifted actually at Christmas, and it's from, no, I don't even have it on me to be able to show you the ball band or anything like that. It's from a yarn producer in Devon who has alpaca and Jacob's sheep. And this was an alpaca Jacob's blend with the natural colour of the Jacob's sheep, which are usually kind of shades of grey, brown, darker colours. Do you know what I mean? And it was really beautiful. It turned out so well, and I whipped it up over a weekend while I was away in Edinburgh, and then managed to give it as a belated Christmas present. So I ticked lots of boxes with that one, and it turned out really nicely in the end. And I just think those Oslo hats, or any simple beanies really, I know people all have their own favourite pattern that they go to for beanies. I think they just make great gifts, and it's nice to know that I can make one with 100 grams of double knit in a weekend. It's always a solid option to go back to. So I think for now, in February, I have a few whips which I'm hoping to make some progress on. Now the first one is actually a new cast on. I'm going to brush over the last two, which are ones which I did talk in depth about in my last whip video. But the first one is actually from my to knit list for this year. So I've already ticked an item off the queue, and I think I'll finish it by the end of this week, which will be a real treat. This here is... I've just realised that I need to make apologies for the cardigan that people keep complimenting again. Anyway, give me 1 second. This is the sweater number 9 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. And for this, I have cannibalised my red cardigan, which was a hack of the sand sweater pattern by Ullen Knitwear. Even though everybody was so lovely in the first video about how it looked, but it just wasn't for me. And I think I did talk a bit about that the other week. And I feel so much better now that the yarn's gone to a good home and is knit up in this project instead. Now, the tension is very uneven. I have in the past, when I've frogged entire projects, put them onto the Swift and steam them and then rewound them. I didn't bother doing that for this just because I thought with the mohair, it would be a lot of effort. And I'm pretty confident in my tension that I think all of the kind of inconsistencies in the yarn from when it was frogged will block out. So I'm yet to block it. I have one sleeve left, which I think I should be able to finish today, to be honest. And then I will block it and I'll see how it turns out. But at the minute, it's fitting really nicely and I'm really enjoying the pattern. It was so quick. I think if I do finish it this week, it will have taken me less than 2 weeks, maybe 10 days or 12 days, which is great for a jumper. And it is on quite large needles. It's on 7mm needles with Aran weight yarn. But to be honest, it's always a good staple. And I think in the future, I'll probably make another one, especially if I have some scraps or anything to use up. I think they'd look fab in this pattern. I just think the raglan detailing is very interesting, the way it's got these pearl bumps either side of the raglan lines. But other than that, it is kind of just a very relaxed mock neck jumper. But I think I'm very excited to wear it when it's done. And it will get a lot more wear and appreciation than the cardigan ever did. So onwards and upwards for that one. Now, I only have 2 more garment whips, which are left over from last month. And I'm hoping to make some progress on these this month, but I don't know if I'm going to commit to finishing them. I know it's finish it February and all that, and, we're clearing up our whips for spring, whatever. But I think I would like to have at least one in the background to tide me over at the same time as working on some new things, because I have a lot of colour work coming up on my queue, and I know in myself that I like to have a plain stockinette project on the go at the same time, because I don't always feel like reaching for colour work depending on what I'm doing at any point in time. So the sweater number 26, which I talked about last time, I'm knitting in a grey kind of Shetland marl yarn. I think I'm going to put that off for a couple of weeks and maybe keep that on the go at the same time as something new, because it's actually not unpleasant to work on at all. It's just that I haven't really got round to it. And I know that it will be a good break now that I'm only on the body and the sleeves, because I've actually completed all the yoke of it, from any kind of more complicated colour work projects that I'm hopefully going to have coming up in the future. And I feel like that will be a little bit more balanced and motivating to just keep the whips down to a manageable number, but also to just have enough variation that I've always got something interesting depending on what mood I'm in. And then the other whip, which I hopefully will start on after I finish the sweater number 9, is my Kaleido Cardi by Rose Knitwear, and I did show this in the last one too. I haven't made any more progress on it. This is still just 3 stripes of the body, but it's definitely not a bad project to work on at all, and I think it's just having the time to focus on it so that I can cull some of my stash from last year, which will also make some room for new projects. This is currently all of the stash, which I'm hoping to use. It takes quite a lot of yarn. I think it's about 1,400 metres recommended. So I'm hoping to get through quite a lot of this, which I have left over. And these are all kind of single skeins. And most of them have had, some part of the skein used at some point. So they're not full skeins. But that kind of makes it perfect for this type of stripy project. The great thing about this pattern, because it's designed to be a scrappy pattern, is actually that Rose Knitwear has put recommended metrages on the pattern for any of the colours in each section of the garment. So she's included the estimated metrage for stripes in the body, for stripes in the yoke, for the sleeves and the cuffs, which is just really helpful to know if you're trying to plan out how you're going to use your stash. I think I'm fortunate that there's not anything in my stash that I'm planning to use which is so small that it might be a problem of running out of it in a stripe or whatever. But, it's always nice to have that information. I appreciate it when designers take the time to include that. knowing that it will make people's lives easier if they're working with kind of limited quantities of certain things. I think we only have one small project left. Now, I am actually away again this weekend. Don't ask me how. And so I obviously had to cast on a small project for the plane because I couldn't possibly be lugging around a big jumper to Liverpool. So I actually have used my Zakami yarn, which I bought in Edinburgh and talked about in my last video, to cast on a little bandana. Now, I've already done a little bit on this just to get it going, mainly because this lives in my work bag so that I can work on it in the office during my lunch breaks, which is why I don't really get a lot done, but it's nice to have something that's small and portable. So this is what I'm starting with at the moment. And it's turning out really beautifully. I just knew this yarn was going to be very cool. And I'm just going to do a triangular bandana. This is an improvised pattern. I might actually do a little instructional video section if anyone's interested, because I didn't really bother looking for patterns on Ravelry because I just sort of knew how I was going to construct it and how it would be easy. But this is essentially worked point to point, so you can use half of whatever quantity of yarn you've got to get to the widest point and then decrease for the other half. And it just has I-cord edging on both sides. So I'm currently at the increasing portion and I haven't used very much of the yarn, so I feel like it might be quite a big scarf, but I'm definitely not complaining about that because if anything, it will just be more wearable and warmer. And it's such a nice, soft merino. I think it will be really great around the neck because occasionally I can be a little bit sensitive, especially in the winter. I think it's just a skin thing. So hopefully I'll be able to finish that this weekend and at the start of next week while I'm away. And that'll give me something to kind of tick off my list. I like having the odd small accessory project on the go, especially for taking to work, and because I live very far away from where my family live, I'm often travelling home sort of once a month or every other month for visits and things. And so I'm always on the go and I need something that's small and easy to pack. So usually it's socks, sometimes it's things like beanies or scarves, but yeah, I think a nice little digestible project is very good for things like that. Makes me feel a bit less guilty about not lugging around my larger garments. But I always need something to keep myself occupied because when you're travelling alone, I mean, sure, what else would I be doing if not knitting on the plane? So yeah, that's the plan for this week. And hopefully by the end of the month, if I can get through the sweater number 9 sleeve and the bandana scarf combination and also the Kaleido cardigan, then I think I'm going to treat myself to the yarn for the Laura Dalgard planet sweater, which I talked about in my 2025 plans. And that is actually the next item that's up on my queue. So I'll be very excited to cast it on and hopefully I can do another little update towards the end of the month and chat about what I've been working on. So the only thing I thought of now that I wanted to have a quick chat about before I finish today's episode is a little bit on colour and my process for choosing colours and resources that I use to kind of get inspiration for different colours. And I know that a lot of people have different avenues that they like to use. I think towards the end of last year and this year, I've become particularly conscious about choosing interesting colours. I used to be such a monochrome person and my wardrobe used to be very, very limited and used to be kind of stuck to a very fixed colour palette. And I think in the last year or so, I've become much better at branching out and embracing bright colours and acknowledging that I can have bright colours that I do like. Because I always thought that I just didn't enjoy wearing colour, but it's because I wasn't picking the right ones. And I think I just didn't really have an appreciation for having a kind of coordinated taste in colour. And I do have a lot of colourwork projects coming up on my queue for this year. So I thought it might be interesting to have a little chat about where my inspiration comes from, and hopefully I'll be able to show the way I use some of these sources of inspiration when I'm planning out my projects in the next couple of months. I think a lot of my day-to-day inspiration comes from Instagram. I do spend not a lot of time, but some time each day on Instagram. And I think choosing accounts to follow that you know have colour schemes that you like or that give you inspiration for choosing colours is really refreshing and a nice way to kind of make it less of a chore or less overwhelming when you have to choose a colour palette for a pattern. And some of the accounts that I'm really loving at the minute, I recently came across Jenna is Feeling, who is, I think she's a graphic designer from the US, and she has excellent colour palettes on her Instagram page. And she kind of does them by mood and by season. She does calendar colours. And I just think they're such great sources of inspiration that it's a really valuable tool, I think. And even just, you know, if it's not applicable for any of your projects, then maybe one day in the future you might remember something that you saw when you thought, oh, I really love that, or I saved that palette for the right time. And I really like that she does kind of summaries of comparing similar colours as well, which I know doesn't always translate unless you're kind of spinning and dyeing your own yarn. But I think it can still help you when you're choosing to shop for different colours in a project. And I've definitely been really inspired by some of the things that she's been posting recently. And I'm hoping to use those in the future coming up. I also love the Pantone Instagram page, and they tend to just do focuses on certain shades. But I still think that that's a great resource for kind of exploring new colours and thinking about the way that they will work in different garments as well. And I think, especially looking for colour palettes for colour work in particular, the account coolers.co is a great tool because they tend to do palettes of 5 or more colours so that you can see kind of different variations and how things combine when you might have more colours to be working with than just 2 or 3. And the best thing about this page is actually that they have an online generator tool where you can explore palettes that they have created themselves, or you can also randomly generate different palettes just to see if anything sparks your inspiration. And I really love that idea, just to kind of keep things fresh and sort of keep you discovering new combinations all the time. I think this year I'm really hoping to kind of branch out. I'm a sucker for green, and I don't need anything else that's green. But I'll always reach for green if I see a potential project that it might work for. And I think I'm going to really challenge myself to use these tools this year to kind of try and stray away from the colours that I usually would gravitate towards, because I know that I will love garments in other colours. It's just about finding, you know, the right shade. Now, I don't personally have a copy, but I do also know of people who love the Dictionary of Colour Combinations, which I believe is a Japanese book, but I know it's published in lots of different languages. And I think that there are other versions of the same, you know, type of concept. And this is kind of similar to a lot of the resources you can get online, but I know I personally would just love to own a paper copy that I can reach to whenever I would like to kind of test myself and use some new colour combinations. And I think it's just a really beautiful book anyway, if you like to display or collect that type of thing. And I think they're a really great resource to kind of keep things new and experimental as well. And at the moment, I'm also very inspired by lots of art that I'm seeing and sort of saving in places like Pinterest, especially kind of abstract, or I'm very into Riso prints, which I know come in set colour cartridge options. I don't know a lot about risograph printing, but it's they definitely have a very limited colour palette because of the nature of the print system, and some of the prints that you can get from that and the creativity that you can get by restricting your access to different shades is very kind of inspiring, and I'm hoping to sort of use some of the colours that I'm picking out from these inspiration photos in the future. And I think it's just nice to kind of go back to and have a little collection of things whenever you're feeling like your work's a bit repetitive or a little bit, you know, samey, especially if you're hoping to kind of curate your handmade wardrobe a bit more and get things that are very wearable, I think having a nice cohesive palette of colours that you really enjoy wearing is very beneficial. And that's definitely something that I'm hoping to work on more this year as well. And that's not necessarily to say that everything has to be in one colour family or a set colour palette, but I think it's just about really loving the colours that you use in everything individually, so that you're kind of more drawn to wearing all your pieces equally, you know, which is easier said than done sometimes. So I hope that was interesting or helpful, or maybe you got some new ideas. I'd love to know what everyone is trying to finish during February this year. If you are doing Finish It February, or if you're just doing, you know, maybe it's Cast on February, if only. That'd be my dream, actually. But just tell me what you're working on. Tell me how it's going. Tell me if you've had any good experiences or bad experiences recently. You know, I'm always interested to see what people are working on. And hopefully I'll be able to check in at the end of the month and update you on how everything has gone and my plans. And maybe a new whip.